Good afternoon. Yep, okay, there we go. I do hay, alfalfa hay as a cash crop, and I get so excited about raising high quality hay. And it's really, really exciting to deliver a load of hay to a dairy producer, whether it's dairy cows or dairy goats, and have their milk production go up because they were feeding some of my hay. So when it's time to make hay, I'll check the weather forecast. And look at there, we got 6 days of sunny weather, low humidity, some wind. Let's go for it. Let's get that hay field cut and get something done.
Hello. Yoo-hoo. This is Mother Nature speaking.
Oh boy.
I hate to rain on your parade. The weather meteorologist was wrong about sunny weather on Wednesday. I'm going to cry on that 90-acre field we just finished cutting today. Yes, I'm sorry about what it will do to the quality of your hay, but sometimes when you feel a good cry coming on, you just gotta cry, regardless of what the weatherman says.
So that's the story of our life. When you're making hay, sometimes the weather changes for you very suddenly and not when you want it to. So yeah, the weathermen can be wrong. But with the baleage system that I've gotten into, that is an equalizer against Mother Nature at least part of the time. So many growers, you know, they want to cut the hay, they get it cut, and then they found out the weather forecast changes on them, and then they sweat bullets. How many times do we ted that hay? How many times do we rake it? Trying to force it to get dry down, dry enough to get it baled. And if they do bale it and it's on the tough side, then they're concerned about, is it going to keep? Is it going to heat? Is it going to mold? What do I do with it? And if they decide, no, it's not going to get dry down, I'm going to leave it out in the field, then you're going to have problems with the rain coming on it. Wisconsin has done some research, and they're finding that, whoops, there we go. There we go. With dry matter loss with no rain and 1 inch of rain on it, very similar results. I'm assuming that's a light rain, but if you got an inch and a half or 2.5 inches of rain, or then the losses went up considerably. Now I did a test of my own. It wasn't my idea to do 8 inches of rain on that hay, but we had a field and we got it half done. I could see the storm coming. It was really rolling in, so I shut the baler off. We got the bales off that field and got those at least wrapped up. Had the rain there that afternoon and evening. The next day the sun come out, so we waited till about noon, tedded it, got it spread out on some drier dirt anyway. Then this day after that we could get it raked and baled, even though this thing's trigger happy. Even though we lost a lot of nutrients, you can see crude protein drop down, anything that was water soluble, RFQ was less than half. I still saved it. I could sell it to somebody with beef cattle. So we got it off the field. I've always stressed on producing high quality hay, and it's always in demand, and many, many times it's in short supply. First 14 years of making hay was many times stressful, and at times it got expensive because I was losing a crop of hay or losing value in that. I'm located in northwest Illinois, and our weather isn't always conducive to making hay. Like we saw earlier, the weather can change rather suddenly, and we don't always have good drying conditions, but I have found that the baleage system is an equalizer. I started doing baleage in 1997, and one thing I have learned, it is very critical to do baleage right. Baleage made right can be a very superior product. Some research done at Penn State and Michigan State has shown that with the baleage system, you can have a total of field loss and harvest loss of only 5%. Any of the other harvest systems, you're going to have more than that, especially if you get into dry hay. We all know that the loss can go up quite a bit higher. There's a bale of hay that we made, and you can just tell there that all the leaves are there. That's some really high quality stuff, and just waiting to get to a cow's stomach and do its job. So to produce and market high quality hay, it's important that you represent your product well, especially when it's wrapped. Nobody's going to see that product until it's ready to feed, and then it's too late to do anything about it. So representation is very important. Now here we have a nice bouquet, a nice bouquet of forage, which your cows are going to love. We have a nice bouquet here, some pretty flowers, which your wife would love, and if you get them turned around, you're going to get in trouble either way. When it's time to rake, I want to try and maintain my quality, so I want to get the hay wilted down as fast as possible. And I found that wide swath drying is very, very critical, because you're going to get 2.7 times more solar energy captured to help get that stuff wilted down. So even under poor drying conditions, by having it widespread, poor drying conditions can be cloudy weather, it can be cooler, low wind, high humidity. I can still get enough drying conditions, usually in a very narrow window of time, to get it wilted down and get it baled up. Moisture range for making baleage, generally they say anywhere from 40 to 60%. You can bump it up to 62 or 3% and still not have problems. If you get over 65, you can have problems with butyric acid formation. You get below 40%, then you're going to start running out of moisture to get proper fermentation. The only exception that we've found, we do have to lower it a little bit, 36 to 40% for some of the dairy goat people, because we've got a small animal and small stomach and they don't want to feed them water. Ideally though, normally I figure 45 to 58% gives you enough fermentation or enough moisture to get good fermentation. So when it's time to start raking, I use a rotary rake for my raking operation. A windrow merger would also work very well. One thing I've learned, you do not want to use a wheel rake. Wheel rakes are designed to operate by dragging on the ground. Your forage is wet, so any dirt that wheel rake kicks up is going to stick to the forage, so you're going to have a higher ash content in your hay, and that is detrimental for feeding the livestock. Also, that dirt has Clostridia bacteria in it. That bacteria is going to ruin that baleage, because that's a perfect environment for it to grow. And with that said, whatever type of rake you use, you've got to keep it up out of the dirt for that same reason. Okay, I'm using a 3x3 baler designed to handle silage. I want to get a good, well-shaped, tightly packed bale so I can minimize the amount of oxygen that's in that bale. I also use a dry applicator to put on a good quality inoculant. There's a lot of inoculants out there. Some of them are good, some of them are not. One scary analysis I saw on inoculant, it said that it had dead bacteria. Well, that's like trying to pull a cart with a dead horse. It just doesn't work. So you've got to have a good quality bacteria that is going to do its job and do it actively. We found some that where the bacteria reproduction rate is like every 48 or 60 hours. Well, that's pretty slow compared to one that's going to double every hour or two. So you're going to get better fermentation and get a better job, and therefore a better quality product. As the bales come into the wrapping site, we'll pull samples out of a representative group of bales. So I've got a representative sample out of everything that comes out of that field. That way, when a customer calls up and wants a certain specific feed value of the hay, I can tell him what I've got and he can buy accordingly. As far as how soon to wrap, we found that it's very important to start wrapping right away. Here we're showing that at 0 hours, it's this line right here. And yeah, the others at 24 to 96 hours get there, but it takes 8 or 9 days for it to get down to that level, so you've had a lot of heat damage and therefore forage loss in that meantime. And that's also the same 63% or 36%, pretty much the same graph. There again, you want to start wrapping right away and get it wrapped up as soon as you can. Generally, my goal is once that bale is out of the baler, I want it wrapped up within 3 hours. We've done a little experimenting on how much plastic to put on. Most of the plastic is 1 mil thick. And I found out through trial and error that you want to have at least 8 mils on, and 8 mils of a good quality plastic has been sufficient for me. Well, there's a lot of lines on there and it makes it hard to follow, but basically we're going to be right in the middle of this group here, and you can see that that's where the trend is to minimize how much temperature it is when it's going through the ensiling process, and to get it down and get it ensiled as quick as possible. You want a good quality plastic, like I mentioned. One of the factors is not only the strength of the plastic, but you want a good tackifier on that plastic so it sticks to itself well and gets a good airtight seal. That way I know that I can deliver a real good quality product to my customers and their livestock. I use the individual bale wrap system. It's the most convenient for us. That way, one factor is that once we get the bales wrapped, we can stack them up and minimize how much storage space it takes. So we get the bales lined up and start wrapping them, pick it up, get a few layers of plastic on, cut it off, set it down, and move on to the next bale. With the right operator on there, we can do a bale every 42 seconds. Once we get them wrapped up, then we take and stack them and get them labeled. Here we've got 61 back there and 63 here. So that tells me the batch back there, they're both field 6, and that was first crop hay, and this is third crop hay. So, you know, they're all white bales, so it's very important that we keep them labeled so we know what we've got and where. Time for delivery, get them loaded up. The individual bales is also an advantage for my customers. That way they can get them laid in whenever time allows. And then they've got the option to feed them. It's easy for storage for them, and then the option to feed them as they need it. It doesn't have to be done on a short-term basis. Baleage is a near perfect feed. You've got all the advantages of the fermentation, which gives you better palatability and better digestibility, and you have also all the advantages of a long stem product as far as the action in the rumen and letting it work properly. I had a neighbor with a 60 cow herd, and he was having to treat 1 to 2 cows a year for a twisted stomach, and he was doing haylage and corn silage. So we started doing baleage for him, and he was feeding that. He went from 1 to 2 a year that he had to treat to 0 in 6 years until he retired. So going to the baleage system was a huge advantage for him. Over the last 17 years of doing baleage, I've learned a lot through trial, error, and observation. Now once we get a sample set in, we get it back from the lab, and everything I sell is basically just off these analyses. This was a first crop from this year. Moisture at 44 was great. Crude protein was only 29.5. In vitro digestibility is 85%, which is great. And the RFQ is 263. So that turned out to be a good product, and it took about 2 phone calls and 2 minutes to get rid of all my first crop this year. I've even got standing orders for the next 10 or 12 years for first crop hay. It just sells itself. So I test every cutting, every field, and that way I know what I've got. As far as marketing, I sell all the hay on a dry hay basis, as everybody's used to buying dry hay based on 15%. So we just zeroed in on some numbers here so it's easy to read. So let's say if dry hay was $120 a ton and the baleage is 43% moisture, so then I sell it for $80 a ton as is. Now that's not current prices, so if you double that, so it's a $240 a ton for dry hay, then it'd sell for $160 a ton as is. That has worked well. It's a fair way to market the hay. Nobody's buying hay, but yet they know they're getting a very quality product. Baleage has been a good thing. It has allowed me to harvest and sell a superior or premium quality product. During these 17 years, I've never chopped anything back on the ground. Sometimes weather conditions do delay cutting a little bit. Sometimes I get some that gets rained on a little bit. But the important thing is I still have a market for it and I can still sell it. Here's my true customer right there. Okay, so when it's all said and done, baleage has been a good thing. It's made making hay a lot more enjoyable and a lot less stressful. Oh, did I mention that baleage makes it so very exciting about making hay? It's so much fun to deliver a product to the customer, whether it's dairy cows, dairy goats. They call me 3 or 4 days later and they are so excited because their livestock is producing more milk. One example, after 4 days, 70 Jersey cows were up 500 pounds of milk. Another example, for dairy goats, he fed it once a day in the evening for 3 days, called me back, he was up 25% in production. So good quality hay does make a difference and it's very exciting to produce. Thank you for your time. Any questions? When I get the test results back, like the one sample there does. Now, as far as baling or knowing when to bale, I've got a Koster forage tester, a dry hay tester, that'll give me a rough idea, but I've had enough years experience that sometimes I'll fill the sample pail and I can tell by how full the sample pail is whether it's time to wait a little bit or hurry up and get going. So a lot of experience and I've got a feel for it. But as far as marketing it, I go by the sample analysis that come back. Yes?
What about the cost of the plastic?
Cost of the plastic is approximately $4 a bale. So that's my storage cost because it's stored outside. The last few years, at 450 acres, I'll run somewhere around 6,500 to 7,000 bales of hay. I do make a little bit of dry hay, but I have so much demand for baleage, there's a lot of times the sun's shining and I'm making baleage anyway. Yes?
Have you ever wrapped hay that was below 40% moisture?
I have. Sometimes it gets away from me because it's too wet one day and then the next day the sun comes out and the humidity drops and it can get away from me a little bit. So when I know that's coming, I do put on extra inoculant and I feel the quality inoculant that I'm using does make a difference because I have had it work down to 32%. Now I was really concerned about that and I probably doubled the application rate. Try and help make sure that I could make it keep. It did, it's not recommended, but we could tell, yes, it had started to ferment, but it ran out of water, like a diesel engine, kind of choking it off on diesel fuel. But it did work, but I don't try and make a habit of that. Like I say, with goats, we're going 36, 37 at the low end. There again, I'm upping the application rate on the inoculant, and it is working, and it's working good for the goats. Yes?
I assume that was alfalfa you were making baleage?
Yes.
Have you tried any other forages?
Grass, and I am doing a 5th year on a field rather than just 4 years, and after the second cutting of hay, we'll no-till sorghum Sudan grass in on that, and then get 3 cuttings of that, and it's working well with the sorghum Sudan grass. So really about anything that you can bale and wrap, you can make baleage out of.
We've got,